there were all of these spare computers around the office, and one of my like kind of PhD egghead coworkers was mining for prime numbers. He was like obsessed with prime numbers, and finally I was like, we could like do something else with all of these spare computers at the office. So yeah, we got about 4 beautiful months of 25 Bitcoin block pre-ASIC mining under our belts.
Hey everyone, Frederick Munawa here with Bitcoin.com at ETH Denver in Denver, Colorado, 2025. I've got Garrett Minks. He's the founder and CTO of RAIR Protocol. Interesting name. What does that stand for?
RAIR Protocol. Well, it's spelled a little bit interesting with the AI in the middle. We do have definitely AI aspirations around the dApp building layer, so we thought we would kind of envelop Web3 with a little AI in the middle. So.
Got it. All right. So tell us a little bit about how you got into crypto and what is RAIR Protocol? What problem are you trying to solve? Maybe start with how you got into crypto.
Sure.
What problems you found in crypto and what problem RAIR Protocol is trying to solve. And that will give us a good idea of what you guys do.
Totally. Well, kind of an interesting early sort of proto crypto entrance. So maybe 2012 timeframe, I was in oil and gas actually building little mathematical models of oil and gas reservoirs.
Wow.
And there were all of these spare computers around the office. And one of my like kind of PhD egghead coworkers was mining for prime numbers. He was like obsessed with prime numbers. And finally, I was like, we could like do something else with all of these spare computers at the office.
I like where this is going.
Tell me more. We got about 4 beautiful months of 25 Bitcoin block pre-ASIC mining under our belts, and ever since then, I've just been obsessed with crypto. So
I think that's the coolest story that we've heard so far today.
Okay, good.
I like that story. All right, so that's how you got into crypto.
Yep.
And so your CTO, I think you've got a technical background. What's your background?
Sure. Well, the kind of bridge between, maybe regular Web 2 kind of cloud infrastructure and then this Web 3 also came from oil and gas. We were building these, big mathematical models of oil and gas reservoirs and needed to leverage a lot of like cloud compute and cloud resources and things like that. And then I was kind of mining for Bitcoin on the side and was like, kind of like, where is the intersection of the two? And we were getting like really extracted horribly by these like DRM vendors of our software. They're basically charging us like a percentage of the value of our software every year in these like really horrible DRM licenses. And I thought, man, like that's the best thing that the blockchain could do is not have some crappy centralized database store all of these like credentials, but have like a public open database store the credentials. So I rebuilt the DRM system at the company. And then the entire time I was thinking, let's not use a centralized database to store this information. Let's use like a blockchain. And that's ultimately led me down the path to the RAIR protocol. That was kind of the version 1 of our platform, was effectively like using NFTs to unlock things platform. And ever since then, we just kind of kept building and kept evolving.
So for the people that are listening or watching, DRM, digital rights management, I take it?
Yes.
Can you explain like what that is in a couple of sentences?
It's such an old school, like 1990s kind of term. Like everybody who knows about it kind of hates it because it's like you had this cool CD, but then there's the software on the CD that kept you from ripping it onto your computer. That's effectively what DRM is. But another way to look at it is like, how do you prove ownership? I own this thing, this other person doesn't. And people don't like to think of the blockchain as a giant DRM system, but that's literally what Bitcoin and like all of these other things are, is like a way to prove that you own something and somebody else doesn't. So I kind of embrace the term. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. It's an interesting way of looking at it. So you rebuilt the DRM system for where you used to work in oil and gas. And so your thoughts were, this shouldn't be on a centralized server. You came up with RAIR Protocol. So now, who uses RAIR Protocol and how do they use it?
That's a great question and another interesting evolution. I would say, version 1 of the company was selling these on-chain DRM type tools in more of a SaaS way to customers like Sony, for instance, those kind of folks who were just dipping their toes into the blockchain waters and just wanted kind of easy to use SaaS tools that they could pay for monthly. And then we would kind of do a lot of the harder infrastructure work behind the scenes for them. And kind of, did that for a few years, sort of along with the Recurs and a lot of these other kind of NFT infrastructure SaaS platforms. And last year kind of had this bold move to just open source everything. And that sort of spurred on this whole second kind of evolution of what we do. But yeah, our original IP and our original stack, which is now 100% on open source on GitHub. If anybody wants to download it, they can. Was a lot of this fundamental DRM technology, and then kind of gone from there.
Okay, so you open sourced your entire platform, and I think I was reading your white paper where you said, the word open source to different people means different things. Some people, they open source a little bit. Some people open source a lot, and some people open source everything. So can you explain that continuum? Like why do they do it in those different, I guess, buckets? Like why do they open source just a little bit, a lot, and everything? And if you give everybody the farm for free, how do you make money? How do you remain sustainable? We just talked about journalism and sustainability and public goods, actually, before this podcast was being recorded. So how do you make money when you open source everything? And is there a case for what other people do, which is open sourcing to different extents, I guess?
Yeah, it is a paradox that you give something away for free that is ultimately a better business model than like locking it up behind a closed gate. And I almost think you can see it playing out in real time, not just in our space, but you kind of see DeepSeek starting to unseat OpenAI a bit, right? How is, DeepSeek monetizing? Well, maybe not directly through, they just give it away to everybody, but they're also clearly using it at this hedge fund to make a bunch of money. And the more important thing that they're doing is establishing a community and establishing a network effect.
Right.
Which you can uniquely do in something that's open that you can't do and something that's closed, at least in our space. So when we open source all of our tools, we effectively open source a way, you can think of it almost like a dApp building engine. All of the tools that you would need, in our case, to build this DRM platform, but feasibly to build any kind of dApp, a front end, a back end, a syncing system, all of those kind of things. When you put them out there fully open source, people can experiment with them in ways that I would say almost every one of our kind of prior competitors you can't do. While they do open source elements of what they do, some of the front end, things like that, they don't give you the whole goods. So you can't actually reverse engineer how the core underlying systems work. And it thus, I think, gives us an advantage in the market, and that we can scale our network effect by being truly open. Whereas a lot of our SaaS-based competitors are ultimately hampered by their business models that they can't really grow as fast because they don't actually show people the underlying goods.
So do you think that's dishonest? Like when people say, when they open source something, but you can't really do any, you can't really see the, some of the key stuff that would make whatever is open source, that would make that stuff useful? Do you think that's dishonest, or is it a more egalitarian business model with just a different degree of egalitarianism, I guess? Is that how you look at it?
It's
just
very deep baseball that only technical people kind of grok in some ways, because you think open source is this big monolithic thing, but the vast majority of the time, a lot of the front end tooling is open source. But the only way that you can access it is you have to go to some centralized server to get an API key, and then you talk to their proprietary backends. So they say, I won't name names, but a lot of businesses do this. And I don't know, is it disingenuous? maybe they're like partial open source, or they allow you to innovate in some areas of their product, but they know that if they don't have a ratchet back to some form of centralized control, then they'll ultimately lose their business model because somebody could just sort of copy paste what they're doing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because like we talked about VCs. VCs always talk about a moat, right? Like, what's your moat? You've got a business. It's a great idea. You're good at what you're doing. But what will stop another person from coming up and just upending you because it's open source? And usually the answer is, well, we've got this little secret sauce here that we have that nobody else has, and that's going to make us billions of dollars. And that's how you get your money from a VC. So you talked about the SaaS models and so forth. So if you don't have that secret sauce, like DeepSeek, and you open source everything, and let's say you do build a community, and you have network effects, are you saying then that later on you can find other ways to monetize that network and build off those network effects? Is that kind of the way?
That's exactly
the only
right.
way?
Yeah, and I will also say there's a almost 30 plus year history of people like some of the largest companies in the world do this. Like, you look at Red Hat, who sold to IBM for $32 billion, right? That's fundamentally open source Linux. How do they monetize it? They're like, well, do you want us to manage it and make it secure and make it reliable for you? Same thing with like a Mongo database. Anybody can run an open source Mongo database, but if you want it to be reliable and not go down, you pay Mongo. So that is one interesting way to monetize open source. And again, you're building a moat because it's open, because people are contributing to it. You're always going to be bigger and better than a closed thing because you have an infinite number of people that can improve yours versus a fixed number of employees that can improve a closed model. So it's interesting that the lower levels of crypto are all open source. Like, obviously Ethereum and Bitcoin are open source. Like, nobody would trust like a black box closed source transaction on Bitcoin, right? It has to be open. But so much of the stuff that's built on top of it is closed. The whole dApp layer, by and large, is like funded by like VC backed like SaaS things. So there's all of these black boxes that are like actually interacting with the blockchain for you.
Right. Yeah. I interviewed one of the Red Hat executives, I think back in 2017, and he explained that. He said, yeah, everything is open source, and then we just have the experience and the people and the expertise to come in and say, hey, if you want us to, like you said, manage this component, we can do that for you for a fee, and then you never have to worry about it. But if you want to do it yourself,
good luck.
Good luck. Yeah. Is that what you guys are doing?
In a way, we have a very interesting Web3 flavor on our monetization of open source. So this new application that we built using our open source stack, this devdapp.com, is a dApp that we built using our open source dApp building engine. And what it does, it sits on top of GitHub, and it gives anybody who connects their GitHub account a Web3 wallet behind the scenes.
Right.
And then now we're able to do all of these really interesting Web3 incentives on top of GitHub that you didn't used to be able to do. So a huge problem in open source is like the compensation of open source, right? People do it for free. They do it for resume building purposes. Our thought is, can we create this onboarding funnel where we take developers' regular GitHub accounts now through all of this awesome account abstraction stuff. They can control a Web3 wallet with their GitHub account. We track what they're doing and we can reward them. That is actually, it's kind of a novel, interesting Web3 native business model that we think natively monetizes because we effectively can be the house that sits in the middle when we're distributing these rewards. So It's a pretty, in some sense, an old school model, almost like a DraftKings or a bookie or something.
Right.
But in a Web3 sense is actually providing, I think, a quite valuable service that we can connect L1, L2 treasuries, infrastructure companies that want things done with developers, and then just sort of act as that matchmaker in the middle.
So do you have your own coin that you compensate developers with and incentivize them with, or are you networking with these L2 players and saying, hey, give your coins to these guys who are working on your projects, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a yes and. We're doing both.
Doing both. Okay.
So we have our own native token, the RAIR token, which we just started actually at ETH Denver now, running our points campaign for this. So any developer that does things in GitHub, we're rewarding them in our RAIR tokens. But the incentive engine that we've built is totally agnostic. And it's not just our own token. We have partners like Akash and some of these other folks who can also come in and contribute tokens, and then we distribute those out. So, yeah. So it's kind of a yes and. We have our own token with its own purpose and its own kind of reason, and then we can also distribute out partner tokens.
So you have like a pool or like a sovereign fund or some sort, like a sovereign fund or what did Trump say? Trump had the
sovereign wealth fund. Yes. Yeah. Yes, well, kind of.
Yeah. A strategic crypto fund. I think it was a strategic Bitcoin reserve became a strategic crypto sovereign fund for the U.S. So is this some kind of fund like that where you've got multiple coins in this one place, and then you use that to incentivize developers who are working on this back-end infrastructure? Is that?
I love that terminology. I actually hadn't thought of it as a kind of strategic reserve before, but that's exactly kind of what we are building. And again, we're in being fully open source with our competitors being kind of quasi closed. We have the unique opportunity to be this neutral Switzerland in the dApp layer. So we don't really care which block space developers use, but we can help route people to this or route people to that. Which also means we're opened up to any infrastructure, again, any L1, L2 blockchain that is that leverages dApps, can all be basically part of this consortium. And then we just kind of sit in the middle as this neutral Switzerland and help reward developers for improving the open source. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
So stepping away from RAIR, so you've probably seen a lot of other dApps, right? Which app are you most excited about right now from what you've seen?
Yeah, the dApp building space is interesting in that it seems the only thing so far that's really hit any kind of product market fit is gambling stuff like Pump Fund and stablecoins. And they're both, they're great. Don't get me wrong, that is absolutely the killer application of crypto, is sending and receiving money back and forth to each other.
Right.
But ultimately, for this current Web 2 internet to evolve into a Web 3 internet, we actually do need compelling dApps that do things besides just gamble and send money back and forth with each other. My favorite kind of dApps, I think, are the ones that are, kind of interface with NFT stuff. Actually, I think it's just such a great community building technology and just such a identifying yourself in a community with other people, and then being able to apply perks or apply rewards or even unlock Web 2 functionality. I really like that search space for dApps. So yeah, I would say, Doodles and things like that, those kind of projects that are kind of innovating and giving communities interesting experiences. I like those kind of dApps the most. And at least it's something creative and not just gambling. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. How about here at ETH Denver? What have you seen, if you have seen anything interesting, compelling, or that you could say, wow, this was worth the visit?
This is a very hot take, and it's something that I just saw launch yesterday, but the CeeLo blockchain, they have this really compelling ZK app. And I think ZK zero knowledge stuff in general is fascinating and is the future and is almost like the HTTPS to our current, if everything we're doing now is public, I send you a Bitcoin, everybody knows about it. The ZK version of blockchains is like the HTTPS. I can send you stuff, but then you don't know. And it's just better to have privacy preserving things, I think. But anyway, CeeLo has a new app called ZK Self. I saw the founder present it yesterday. It hooks into the NFC chip in any passport in the world, creates a ZK proof out of it. And then if you only want to give somebody your age, or you only want to prove your nationality, or you only want to prove some discrete subset of that information, you can actually do that securely in a privacy preserving way. And
Wow.
I just love that. I just think that is actually a really valuable use case for crypto. So
How do you spell it?
I think they were like self.ex. Oh, CeeLo is the underlying kind of performant blockchain that it runs on.
Okay.
And then the product, the dApp that they just launched is the
Okay.
self.xyz, I believe.
Got it.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I think anything ZK, I like the way you describe ZK as being the HTTPS of crypto, because that is true. But even on Ethereum, even on Bitcoin, there are ways to anonymize stuff, but it's not simple. It should be automatic. It should be built in, I think, into all of those systems, where if you're sending money to someone, nobody knows about it, right? It's your own private transaction. So I like that concept. ZK proofs are just amazing. Yeah. And my last question, I guess, would be for someone entering crypto, could be an engineer, a dev, or somebody else, somebody who's building mathematical models. I guess would be more in AI, I guess, if that's the case.
Sure.
So most of those guys are, I guess. What advice would you give them if they wanted to be, I don't know, a builder or something else in crypto?
Right. I always like to say to new folks, because there's, again, for every Web3 developer, there are like 900 Web2 developers. It's still a very nascent space. There aren't that many Web3 developers, and a lot of just regular good developers that look in on the space kind of see it in this like almost like vaulted, like holier than thou thing that like seems to have this mystique of being really hard and really difficult around it. And I guess I would just say that's dumb. don't buy into that narrative, because especially for us, like in the dApp layer, just building dApps, basically dApps are 99% just regular apps that happen to have a little bit of blockchain in them.
Yep.
So if you want to be a Web3 developer, like basically you already are.
That's an interesting take. Yeah.
You just need to do a little bit of syncing, and you just need to use this other kind of database. And you're probably still going to use a regular database to store all of your users' information anyways. You're just going to go query this like other special kind of database that is a blockchain. So I don't know. I like to tell that to people because I get that so much, especially with the developers that we work with, or we go to hackathons with students and they're like, oh, I love, Web3 seems exciting, but it's so intimidating. And they're like, no, it's not. Just build a regular app and then just like sprinkle in a little bit of blockchain.
Yeah, well, that's great. All right. Well, I think that's all I have. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Garrett Minks. He is the founder and CTO of RAIR Protocol. Garrett, thanks for coming.
Yeah, amazing. This is awesome. Thanks for having me, Frederick.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.